Good afternoon, everybody. We are 6 minutes into the afternoon. So I first want to thank my wonderful colleagues, Senators Merkley and Klobuchar, for joining me here. Today is a monumental day because we're introducing S1 for the People Act, one of the most important pieces of legislation that has come before the Congress in a very long time. I want to thank Senator Merkley. He's the lead sponsor. I want to thank Senator Klobuchar. She's the chair of the Senate Rules Committee, for being here. And look, as Senate Majority Leader, one of the very first things I did was designate the For the People Act as S1 to show how important it is to our country and to our caucus. That was the first legislative bill from Democrats. Our first bill after suffering through 6 years of Mitch McConnell's legislative graveyard. And what did Democrats make clear? That we're standing up to voter suppression. We are standing up to the despicable acts of voter suppression in so many states. We are committed to ending dark money that has corrupted our politics and government for too long. And we are ensuring that public officials work for those they represent, not special interests. This is comprehensive, it is strong, and it is democracy with a capital D. Earlier this year, we witnessed the horrible attack, the despicable and violent insurrection right here at the Capitol. All three of us experienced it firsthand. I was only 30 feet from some of these insurrectionists. It was an attack fueled by hatred and by insidious lies spread by the former president, aimed at overturning the results of a free and fair election. And in the wake of the election, dozens of states seized on the former president's big lie and introduced over 250 bills, making it harder for people to vote. You know them, but they're outrageous. When you lose an election, what you do in a democracy is try to win over the people who didn't vote for you, not prevent them from voting. That is autocratic. That is anti-democratic. That is anti-American, and it's nothing short, again, of despicable, nasty, and in many cases racist. Ask the Georgia legislature why it is only on Sunday they don't want to have early voting. It's to prevent African Americans from voting. It's Jim Crow. A century after we thought Jim Crow was dying, and it's been resurrected in the most horrible way. To say that you need a notary public before you can vote by absentee is despicable and ruining our democracy. According to the Washington Post, the laws they're putting in could make it harder for tens of millions of Americans to vote. Many of them people of color, many of them students and young people. We have never seen anything like this. It's happening in states all across the country. All across the country. And you know what's happening. So this is not democracy. When you disenfranchise people by passing Jim Crow laws, that's not democracy, that's dictatorship. And that's where our Republican friends seem to be going. We need America to stand up to this, and we must stand up to it in the Senate. Failure is not an option. I also want to say there are other important parts of this bill. Obviously, the Citizens United case, which has allowed, I just read today, someone sending his friend $10 million in Ohio. That one person should have that influence is despicable. Allowing unlimited dark money in our politics has just damaged our democracy in very serious ways and causes people to just lose faith in the process. So the For the People Act is a commitment from Senate Democrats to say we're going to preserve our democracy, we'll have real solutions, It is one of the most monumental bills that has come before us in a very long time. It has the support of the American people, including 57% of the Republicans, according to a recent poll. And we know that history's eyes are upon us. If we allow this retrograde, backward leap, shame on us and woe is our country. Senator, who goes next? Senator Merkley.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader Schumer, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for designating this S1 in the symbolic representation of how important this is to the future of our country. I'm proud to introduce today, in partnership with dozens of my colleagues, S1, the For the People Act. President Lyndon Johnson said, "The vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice and destroying the terrible walls which imprison men because they are different from other men." Think about that. The ballot box is the pulsating heart of our republic, of our government, of, by, and for the people. As Johnson said, the most powerful instrument ever devised. The central driving vision of our nation is that through our elections, every citizen can participate in guiding our country. Our nation, however imperfect in the beginning, has worked toward this goal for over 200 years, overcoming barrier after barrier. We overcame some of the barriers of race with the 14th and 15th Amendments. We overcame barriers of gender with the 19th Amendment. We overcame barriers that denied Native Americans the right to vote with the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. We overcame the barriers of Jim Crow with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And now this core central right is under attack again. As we speak here today, there are more than 250 bills in 43 states assaulting the right to vote, making it harder for students, for low-income Americans, for seniors, for college students, for our black and brown Americans to vote. No access to the ballot has been a form of systemic racism throughout our history. And once again, we see this raising its ugly head. But every member of the Senate took an oath of office to defend the Constitution. And that means all 100 of us should be working to defend access to the ballot box, to protect and defend the Constitution. It's our responsibility to ensure the ability of every American citizen to participate in the elections. So in the face of the greatest attacks on voting rights in this nation since Jim Crow, the For the People Act protects American citizens' rights. This legislation puts power back where it belongs, in the hands of we, the people. And it tackles two other corrupting forces in our elections. This bill breaks the dominance of big money in our politics. So members of Congress are beholden to voters, not to billionaires and big corporations funding attack ads. Dark money has been like a stadium sound system drowning out the voice of ordinary Americans. We have to turn that sound system off so the people can be heard. And it stops gerrymandering, because people should choose their politicians in a republic, not the other way around. And because gerrymandering violates every American's right to equal representation, undermining the legitimacy of congressional action. For our Constitution, for our nation, for our we the people vision of government, we have to get this done. And it would not be possible to do it without the extraordinary work of the chair of the Senate Rules Committee, Amy Klobuchar, and her very capable team. So it's my pleasure to introduce a superb, essential partner in this effort, Chairwoman of the Rules Committee, Senior Senator from the great state of Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you for your incredible leadership, Senator Schumer. I think the SF1 says it all, that this is the first bill of the United States Senate. And thank you for acknowledging my state, which in fact nearly every year has the highest voter turnout in the country, with so many of the people in our state deciding to vote. And when they vote, whether they vote for you or not, they are part of democracy, and that is really what our goal is here. The heart and soul of this bill is making it so people can vote. And if you don't think that's an issue this year, then you slept through all of last year. Because last year what we saw were people trying to make it harder for people to vote. Last year, even after the election, we saw that happening with hundreds of lawsuits that were thrown out by both Democratic and Republican appointed judges. Last year, we saw 8 million more people vote for one candidate for president. Okay, what does a losing party usually do when that happens? They reassess. They look at what their policies are, how they can better reach voters, how they can better have messages. Sadly, that doesn't appear to be what's happening here with, as my colleagues point out, over 250 bills so far introduced, including in my state, in legislatures across the country to suppress the vote. What they are doing right now, they are saying, well, we're not going to change our policies. We're doubling down on them. We're not going to vote for the American Rescue Plan. Instead, we're going to disenfranchise people so that less people vote, because we didn't like what happened in the last election. That is what's going on here. That being said, this bill is supported, as Senator Schumer pointed out, by a majority of Republican constituents. There's an analogy here with the American Rescue Plan that Senator Schumer so deftly got through the Senate. There is an analogy because Republicans and Democrats supported that bill, but it was stopped in this chamber until we figured out a way to do it. This bill is supported by Democrats and Republicans across the country. They hate all the outside money and the negative ads, and they hate the fact that people are trying to make it harder to vote when they've all learned many times for the first time because of the pandemic how to vote by mail. And they say we kind of like it. Now, people in some of these states are trying to take it away from them. This bill, as Jeff pointed out, is about 1, making it easier to vote, 2, getting the dark money out of politics, and 3, cleaning up some of these situations in our country, like the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court, does not have an ethics code in place. So there are some, I remember when I first got to the Senate, and this bill was led in part by Barack Obama, who was then a senator. Our first effort was ethics reform. And guess who signed that bill? Senator Schumer knows this. George Bush signed that bill because we realized there were things that we had to do to clean things up. So one thing you need to know, despite any of this stuff you hear from them about, fraud, when you know you have more chance of getting struck by lightning than committing election fraud, all of that going on, there is significant support for provisions in this bill by Republican governors who made changes in their state. There are 9 major provisions in this bill that are in fact bipartisan, including a number of mine that have been introduced with Republicans. So let's look at what the intent here. And the intent here is to make sure that people have their rights. What does the kids say every day with the Pledge of Allegiance? One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Not for some, for all. And as I said at the inauguration, this is a moment where, after the horror of January 6th, which was all about a group of people using violence to try to stop votes being counted, legal votes being counted, it is the moment where our democracy picks itself up, dusts itself off, and moves forward as we always have together. That's what this bill is about. Thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for your incredible leadership, as well as Senator Schumer.
Okay. Questions on this subject? Yes.
When do you intend to put this on the floor, and how does it differ from the House bill?
We intend to put it, there is a campaign. First, we have step-by-step process. Senator Klobuchar is having hearings on the bill next week. March 24th, in a few weeks. At the same time, there is a strong national campaign throughout the country showing how important this is. We will put the bill on the floor. We will see if our Republican friends join us. If they don't join us, our caucus will come together and decide the appropriate action to take. Everything is on the table. Failure is not an option. Yes.
Leader Schumer, when you say failure is not an option, does that mean that you would consider reforming the filibuster for bills like this?
Failure is not an option. Everything is on the table. Yes.
Senator Warnock is going to give his maiden speech on this topic in
Yes.
just a few minutes. What role do you expect him to have in this?
I think he knows what voter suppression is like in Georgia. He knows what they're doing now. I think he's going to be a very persuasive voice for Democrats and Republicans to pass S1.
President Biden said today that he would be open to a talking filibuster. How would that impact how you guys move forward?
Look, as I repeat, failure is not an option. We must get this done, and everything will be on the table.
We heard the Republicans saying that, well, wait a second, why is the federal government interfering with the rights of the states to run the elections they see fit? How do you address that?
The bottom line is that our democracy and the right to vote, particularly when it's discriminatory, has always been a province of the federal government.
Could I just add one thing?
Yeah, sure.
It's really clear. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations. And what we have seen across the country are changes, but not in every state. Not every state has what we have in my state and Jeff's state that assures that votes are counted and it's easier for people to vote with same-day registration and with making people automatically registered. I would add that you've got red states like Utah that have made it easier for people to vote with mail-in ballot. And one of the things that I found ironic was after this last election, one of the arguments our colleagues are making is, well, that was a mess. Well, first of all, let's realize it wasn't actually a mess. In the middle of a pandemic, we had what their own Homeland Security Department called the safest election in history. And the reason it seemed like a mess was that there were hundreds of unwarranted lawsuits that were filed by President Trump across the nation. And in the end, they were all rejected. And one of their primary complaints, and something they've told me they're interested in, was that a few of the states, as you know, don't start counting votes until after the election, right? And other ones process them when they come in. This bill fixes that. One of the primary Republican complaints.
Go ahead, you want to say something?
I'll just add on this that this argument that this is a violation of states' rights is absolutely wrong. Our founders knew that the election of the members of Congress has an impact on every American in every state. And therefore, Congress has the responsibility to make sure those elections are fair across this country. And that's why, as Amy pointed out, it says Congress may at any time make or alter regulations. That is why. So it is not just the ability of this, it is the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that these elections are fair.
Jeff, you want to also mention that we've made changes.
Yeah, we've made about 15 changes, a few of whom that make sure we deal with some of the changes contemplated in the states, and a few others that are technical, but nothing that significant.
We've been meeting with Secretary of States, taking their feedback, because we want to make sure that this law can be implemented effectively for next year's primaries, next year's general election. And they have provided us examples of where we need to kind of round off some of the sharper corners to make sure this can be done well. And just to give you one small example of what I'm talking about, a reference to counties, which is common to most of our states. Some states don't have counties, so you have to say election jurisdictions, so therefore a change.
Okay, any more on this subject? Okay,
Okay. Thank you,
thank you
everybody.
very much.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Green.